floor, and he had to sign the order form. He, unable to say anything, signed the document and left. Alina then continued with her work, attending to more adventurers. Later, Alina was in the office, tired from so much work with a mountain of papers. The other receptionist had left, and she was also in charge of processing the request documents. She wondered why she had to do the tabulation of the order forms. She remembered the other receptionists when they left and said she hated overtime. It was only her 3rd year as a receptionist to be given such an important job. She wanted to go home and repeated it several times. She wanted to quit and leave it all. Next to her was a potion, and she drank it. Seeing the mountain of documents, she thought it would never end, and all that work was because of the dungeon boss. In the Belfra underground ruins, the boss of the deepest floor, the infernal fire dragon, had not been defeated. The dungeon capture was stalled. Defeated monsters leave the dungeon but return because they do not want to be defeated. This makes adventurers go after the monsters for the guild rewards for subjugating monsters, as it was a source of income for their partners and others. As the dungeon capture progresses, adventurers receive more and more mission requests. As a result, the reception was very busy during the day, and at night she was chased by a lot of work. For Alina, it was hell. Although she got a stable job as a receptionist, it was difficult. As long as the dungeon capture was not completed, she would not enjoy the peaceful life of a receptionist. After working overtime because of that boss, she ate, slept, and worked every day. She even worked on vacations. It would not end while the boss was still sitting there. She sighed and said she was at her limit. She had patiently waited for the dungeon capture and had endured the desperation and temporary overtime. If the dungeon capture were completed, peaceful days would return. So, she would do her best, reluctantly working the overtime. She, very upset, said it was always like this. They couldn't defeat the boss, those incompetent adventurers. She pulled out a first-level guild card with her name. This was the last forbidden resource to get rid of overtime. Although, if the extra work in front of her disappeared, she said that extra work stank. She started filling out a form to subjugate the dragon solo with her signature, so if she subjugated it, she would definitely get home on time. In the deepest layer of the Belfra underground ruins, a dragon was fighting against a group of adventurers. They were uneasy as the dragon was very strong and the attacker could not approach. Also, the ice magic they had cast was rejected by its scales. It was the Silver Sword group, consisting of 4 members. Gans was on his knees as his battle axe was shattered. The defender told him not to give up and to regroup with the others. They were surprised as it was so strong that the soul relic had not worked, and that thing had consumed the relic. He explains that monsters that take relics become stronger, and very rarely does a monster swallow one. They lose to the great power of the relic and most die. Some endure the power, and others gain a body and magical power. As a result of absorbing ether, they become a fortified species unmatched in that era. Gans was on the floor trembling, and the defender said they needed to advance as the situation was going poorly. Suddenly, someone cloaked appeared walking towards the dragon. This made them very nervous, and they asked who he was and what he was doing, as with that little armor, the dragon would turn him to ashes. The person, ignoring everyone, activated her ability and pulled out a huge hammer. She held it and prepared for the fight. The adventurers, surprised, asked her about the ability she had used, as she had created a weapon out of nothing and they had never seen anything like it. In front of the dragon, it was revealed that Alina was the one in the hood, and she told the dragon that it was trash with a very angry face. She began walking towards the dragon, and it started charging its breath attack. The adventurer, seeing this, shouted at her to be careful as it was charging its attack and asked if she wanted to die. Ignoring him, Alina continued towards the dragon and told it that it had not yet been defeated, and that was why its overtime hell was not ending. The dragon launched its fire breath, and she, with a leap, positioned herself on its head and, swinging her hammer at it, shouted for it to die and struck it on the head. The blow was so powerful that the dragon was immediately slammed into the ground, defeated in one hit. The adventurers, seeing this, could not believe it, as the boss they had been unable to compete with was defeated in a single blow. Alina approached the dragon and began hammering its head, telling it that it was because of it that her overtime hours never ended. She worked overtime, but she didn't want to, and she also wanted to go home on time. Cursing it, she unleashed an even more powerful blow, turning half of its body to dust. After the body disappeared, it dropped a sphere. The adventurers behind her were speechless, watching and unable to believe that what had given them so much trouble was turned to dust so quickly. Alina, after finishing, made her hammer disappear. The adventurer who was the tank of the group, Silversword, thought that he had always been on the front lines to capture the dungeon. Not only does he protect his allies from being attacked by the enemy, but he also leads the battle by taking command. He fought alongside strong people, trying to concentrate each one's power, but the person he had just seen had an overwhelming attack power, something he had never seen before. Gans, from behind, said the word executioner. The tank, hearing this, did not understand, and Gans explained that this person would suddenly appear in a dungeon where the capture was stalled, subduing the boss alone and completing the capture, the legend of the mysterious adventurer. He was surprised to hear that she subdued bosses alone, as adventurers usually collaborate in groups to fight monsters. Defensive tanks attract enemies, healers heal the injured, the main attacker, with their melee weapon, is the first to attack, and the magical attacker clears the way with special attacks and supports other attacks. Not too much, not too little, just enough to fight and win against strong enemies in a tight dungeon. After 200 years of trial and error, the most efficient combination was reached. Furthermore, if the floor boss was a high-ranking monster, it was inevitable to go in a group. It was reckless to undertake subjugation alone, and it was not advisable. But what he saw in front of him was a main attacker with a warhammer who defeated the boss by herself. Alina, talking to herself, said that with this, she should be able to get back on time starting tomorrow, and turning around, she said she would go home early. She walked with the silver sword tank and left the dungeon. The tank, reacting, told his companions that he couldn't be mistaken, and the executioner was not a veteran, nor an angel of death, but a human girl. Several days later, Alina was at the reception attending to adventurers, but this time with a happy face. The place was less crowded and there was less work, so she put up a sign at her desk and sat down to rest, feeling embarrassed as she had done it again. She was reading a search order. The Silver Sword Group was looking for someone to offer the position of attacker on their team. The person they were looking for was a short adventurer, wore a cloak, and their face and gender were unknown. Their weapon was a giant silver hammer, and their alias was the Executioner. If they saw or knew anything about this person, they should report it immediately. Alina thought it was foolish. After completing the capture of the Belfra underground ruins, the number of applicants had indeed decreased. She was able to handle the pending work in a few days and finally could go home on time. Some adventurers were there talking about the news and how the relentless Gans was retiring. They said his retirement was due to permanent injuries. One of them said that when hearing news like that, he worried about how much longer he could continue working as an adventurer. The other said he would take that opportunity to apply to the Silver Sword team. The other replied that there were many monsters with great abilities, but the other one said he also had dreams, like living in a wealthy neighborhood of a big city like Eifer, earning a lot of money, and becoming ridiculously rich. And he wanted to be surrounded by pretty girls, just like Jade, the leader of Silver Sword, but talking about the executioner. This made Alina very nervous as she was overhearing the conversation. They were saying that she killed the boss that even Silver Sword had struggled with, and with a single blow. They wondered who she could be. One had heard rumors, but never believed that the executioner's story was real. The other said that since Jade from Silver Sword was the one saying it, the story must be true. It also seemed that the guild was looking for her. They were even using their information-gathering equipment, so it was just a matter of time before they discovered who she was. The adventurer wanted them to find her, as he was curious to know what kind of person the executioner was. After hearing that conversation, Alina left, thinking about the Silver Sword Group and hoping that it was all a joke, as she couldn't afford to be dragged into that problem, because when you're a receptionist, secondary jobs were strictly prohibited. A receptionist always had to be in the best physical and mental condition possible. They are quick and efficient when dealing with paperwork related to requests, and there was no way they would be allowed a secondary job, especially if it was as an adventurer. having a fake license with a false name, defeating bosses in secret, all to avoid overtime. There was no doubt that if discovered, she would be fired. Even if the extra work was difficult, the benefits of being a receptionist were endless. Generous benefits, stable income allowing you to plan your future, and the best part, you never had to worry about finding work again. It was the only lifelong job. In that ambitious and absurd society, if the company you work for faces financial difficulties and is dissolved, you could be fired if your performance was not excellent, or your boss could flee overnight, leaving you unpaid. All these things were very common these days. But a receptionist is a public servant, so they will never lose their job or be fired, even if their performance is poor. The Adventurer Guild, which is the designated authority, is the backbone of the city. There was no way the superiors would take your salary and run. A profession that guarantees your livelihood and continues paying you for the rest of your life, that's what this job truly is. She thought that's why she became a receptionist in the first place. Working overtime was only temporary. The number of new colleagues would eventually increase, and she would also be able to assign the more tedious tasks to them. She would not do any more overtime, so she wouldn't let something as trivial as that end her career as a receptionist. In the arena of the city of Eifer, Jade Scrade from Silver Sword was analyzing a battle between several adventurers who were applying for the position of attacker. They faced each other with skills such as the hero's roar or super strength. The adventurer managed to defeat the muscular one. Jade was talking to a butler about how the skill the man had just used was a primary skill, which strengthens the body but remains within the range of human capabilities. On the other hand, the woman's skill was more transcendent, or a super skill, which allows her to surpass the limits of human abilities. So, in a head-to-head comparison, the super skill is by far the most powerful. But her super strength skill does not compare to the mysterious power of that adventurer. The butler tells him that he was mistaken. After all, that sword-wielding woman had the most powerful strength skill in those places, and that was certain. But Jade tells him that it was not the same person, as she did not have the same hair color or face. The butler says he must have been dreaming or something, because no matter what strength skill you use, there is no way someone could defeat a monster that ate a relic with a single blow. Even if he used a super skill, as he said, it was simply impossible. A girl tells him that he was right. It was Laluri Ashford of Silver Sword. She says that if they had heard of a young woman carrying a giant hammer, it would exist. Even veteran adventurers have trouble handling a weapon like that. She tells him that, anyway, it was not the time to dawdle. Jade tells her that she also saw her with her own eyes. She says yes, but they had very few clues to search for her. And it is true that her build is small, but they couldn't say she was a woman just based on that. Besides, the name in the solo adventure records is a man's. He says he was not sure about that and that it was a woman. They had not informed the guild, but he clearly saw a woman. She had black hair and light green eyes, and was quite young. Laluri tells Jade that everything she had done since that day was to search for the user of that giant hammer. They already had new adventures assigned by the guild. They seriously needed to start looking for an attacker, or they would have a big problem soon. He was the team leader, so he had to act like one. Jade tells her that she was right. He began to reflect on the matter. He knew that with Gans leaving the group, his main priority now was to find a new attacker, so he had no time for that. The thing was that since he saw the hammer girl in the dungeon, he had been strangely intrigued. He couldn't stop thinking about her, and wanted to be the one to find her. He checked the records of every registered female adventurer, even paying a renowned informant organization, but he couldn't find any leads. Maybe he was mistaken and it wasn't actually a woman, so he decided they would start interviewing attackers from the next day. Jade was walking through the city, thinking about that girl he saw a month ago. She had a mysterious white light surrounding her, and it wasn't due to a primary or super skill. The skill that made her weapon appear out of nowhere left no doubt. She had some kind of unknown power, or perhaps a divine skill. A legendary skill whose existence has only been proven in ancient literature, a skill of the gods. A power that his ancestors once saw and used as a blessing from the god himself. It is said that this power surpasses even super skills. So powerful that it made the ancient continent of Helcassia prosperous enough to be called the Kingdom of Gods. However, that skill disappeared when his ancestors perished. Nowadays, super skills are the most powerful abilities that exist, though they are still far inferior to any divine skill. If that girl was a user of a divine skill, then his curiosity would be satisfied. But even if an adventurer with such a skill really existed, the whole world would have heard of him. He took an object from his pocket and thought it was the red sphere that the infernal fire dragon had dropped. Relics, engraved with the symbol of the god of his ancestors, had great yields and very high commercial value. Any adventurer would normally have hoarded that loot, but the hammer girl was not interested in that relic at all. It seemed as if her only goal was to kill that boss. He didn't know the reason, but she seemed quite annoyed with that dragon. Anyway, that relic would be sold for a high price, and he needed to find her to give her the money as well. He was determined to find her when suddenly, in front of him, a girl walked by with black hair and green eyes like jade. At that moment, he realized that it was her, the hammer girl, and he had no doubt, so he ran towards her through the crowd of people. Happy that he had found her, he couldn't let her escape. But he was even more surprised when he saw her enter the Adventurers Guild. Jade opened the guild doors and went to the reception. While everyone was watching, he stood in front of Alina and said, "Hello." Alina, seeing this, became very nervous. She thought that not only was he an adventurer with 3 super skills, but his attractiveness made many women fall at his feet. It was said that he was the best tank among first-class adventurers, the leader of Silver Sword, Jade Scarred. In other words, he was one of the adventurers present when she defeated the dragon a month ago. She wondered why he would come there. All the missions that elites could take had already been sent, and she had her face hidden. Her application was false, and her license as well, so there should be no way to track her. Suddenly, another receptionist approached and asked what brought him there, and why the leader of the powerful Silver Sword would be there. If he was looking for a mission, she would personally take care of it. He tells her that he was not there for that, and as he turned, he saw Alina almost leaving and called her. The other girl tells him that she was Alina and asks if something was wrong with her. He says he just wanted to talk to her privately. This surprised Alina greatly, and she thought she was finished, as the Silver Sword leader was on par with the guild executives. She couldn't mess it up. She asked him how she could help him. He told her there was something he wanted to ask her, and said that about a month ago, in the ruins of Belfra, he saw a warrior with a hammer and had been searching for him since that day. He asks if, by any chance, she knew who he was. She apologizes and says she can't help him as she doesn't know the identity of that person. And if he wishes, she could ask the other receptionists if they had information about the adventurer he was looking for. Jade tells her that he had very sharp senses and could even see clearly in total darkness. This left Alina frozen. He tells her that's how he was able to see her face perfectly. He says that the adventurer who used a giant hammer was a woman with black hair and emerald green eyes. Alina looks at him with a poker face but was sweating with nerves. She thought it was all a joke and a lie. She had hidden her face, and there was no way he could have seen her. Besides, receptionists were prohibited from having a second job, much less being adventurers. Her life was over, and so was her life as a receptionist. Although her time there was short, that job brought her security and stability. Though now that she thought about it, she felt she was only doing overtime and had no good memories, but she was okay with it. She preferred spending her time working rather than risking her life as an adventurer. She reacted and thought that she finally got the job of her dreams. Good pay and a secure position, so she wouldn't let it go so easily. Jade tells her that he would never have thought she was a receptionist. So now he understood why he couldn't find her, because he thought she was an adventurer. He placed the relic and told her it was hers after all. Alina tells him to refrain from making those jokes and explains that relics were symbols of the knowledge and technology of their ancestors. So they were known to be superior in terms of hardness and durability compared to any modern material. He says that if that is true, that's why relic-grade weapons are so strong. Alina grabs the sphere and breaks it with her hand, placing it on the counter, which leaves him speechless. She tells him that she wanted to live her life as a receptionist in peace and didn't give a damn if he was an elite of the guild, so she wouldn't forgive anyone who disturbed her peaceful life. So if he didn't want to get his ass kicked like he did with the dragon, it would be better for him to leave and never show his face around there again. She asks him if he understood, and he, very nervously, nods his head. She, very angrily, asks him what he is still doing there and leaves. Later, on her way out, Alina was happy thinking that she was worried about that situation, but managed to get rid of that guy and was glad to go home on time. On the way, she encountered Jade, who was waiting for her at a corner. He says hello, and she, very angrily, wonders what he was doing there. With a smile, he asks if there's anything she could help him with. He, a bit nervously, says he just wanted to talk to her. She tells him she assumed the conversation would be about that mission. However, she regretted the inconvenience, but the reception had already closed for the day, so she would leave. He asks her to wait a moment and grabs her hand. Alina, realizing she couldn't move her arm, realized he was using a skill. He tells her it's one of his skills, Iron Wall Guard, and has the ability to harden and reinforce any object he touches. Although it doesn't work on humans, it can restrict their movement by hardening their clothes. He says he feels very bad for doing this, but if he didn't try something, she wouldn't speak with him properly. Alina looks at him with a disgusted face, and he, panicking, says it's not what she thinks and that he's speaking as the leader of his team. He asks if she would speak to him, referring to her as Miss Executor. She says it's fine, but at least in another place, pointing to a nearby alley. Once there, Jade tells her he'll be clear with her and asks her to join his group, Silver Sword. Alina, without even listening, pulls out her hammer in an attempt to hit him. He screams, dodges her attack, and asks in panic what she's doing. Alina, with a very serious face, tells him she's closing his dirty mouth. She tells him that receptionists couldn't have extra work, and if she got caught, she would be fired. She wasn't going to risk losing the job she worked so hard to get. So he had to die and let her have a peaceful life. Jade asks her to wait a moment and asks where she got that hammer. She says she has no idea and that it only appears when she activates her skill. He says that this skill must be a divine ability. Alina, not understanding, asks what that is, and Jade is surprised that she doesn't know and still uses it. He tells her that it was rumored that ancestors had divine abilities, which were much more powerful than the ones used currently. Although its existence is based only on ancient literature, she tells him he couldn't know if it was true if it was a divine ability. She says that the very fact that her weapon manifested when she activated her skill was intriguing, and they knew for sure it was completely different from a super-level ability and even stronger. Alina says she really doesn't care about these things, so she would end his life right then. Jade tells her to wait and talks about how his team was in a very bad position at that moment. After seeing her defeat the dragon, Gans became so depressed that he decided to retire, so that's why they needed an emergency vanguard. She asks him if he hadn't retired due to injuries that couldn't be treated. Jade says he was a very proud person and couldn't admit the truth, so they said that. She asks if that means she should take his place since she was the cause of his retirement. Jade says it wasn't about that and that it was because he wanted her. Alina immediately tells him that's sexual harassment and abuse of power, so she would sue him. He says he didn't mean that. She says she didn't believe she needed a receptionist overwhelmed with work and bets that he already has enough women to be happy. Jade says he didn't care about the others. The moment he saw her strength and face, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Alina says she's about to vomit, and Jade, panicking, says his words were very serious. He asks her to join his team. Alina looks at him and says he doesn't understand. All she wants is to live her life as a receptionist in peace, and he and his team would only interfere with her plan. She asks if he could stop being a nuisance. Jade then asks why she killed the dragon if she only wanted to be a receptionist. There was no need for her to complete the dungeon, and if she hadn't done it, he wouldn't have started looking for her, and she wouldn't have to be hiding her face so desperately. She says she just wanted to avoid more overtime. Jade says he doesn't understand, and she tells him in simple terms that if that dragon died, she wouldn't have to work extra hours. Jade, confused, asks her if she did it just for that reason. Alina asks what's wrong with his face. She needed another reason, and grabbing him, asks if he can understand the hopeless feeling of seeing a mountain of paperwork that never ends. Or when you're ready to go home and someone shows up to give you more work on your desk, all because they were useless at completing a dungeon, and that's why her hell never ended. That's why she put an end to that damn dragon. Very annoyed, she asks what's wrong with that and why everyone is interested in her identity. Jade says he's sorry and tells her that if she joins his team, she wouldn't have any more overtime. She says there's no regulated schedule for being an adventurer and that she just wants to keep her stable, secure, and well-paid job. Adventurers depend a lot on external factors, and it's not known how long they will be able to keep working, so she was not interested in such an unstable job. Since she wouldn't join his team, if he wanted a vanguard, he should find someone else. And with a threatening tone, she tells him that if he dares to mention anything, she would crush him like the dragon. This left him very nervous, and he thought he wouldn't give up on her. The next morning, Alina wakes up thinking she had been discovered and, a bit depressed, wonders what she would do at that moment. She wondered if she should have used a bit more violence to shut him up. Then she thought that if she laid a finger on a high-ranking guild member, she would end up being fired anyway. She was fed up with it and didn't want to get up, didn't want to go out. She just wanted to stay in bed and escape reality. Alina opened the window of her room and thought that she really liked this place. There were no annoying clients she had to smile at or any groups of stalkers. She didn't have to deal with any social interactions or a ton of work to finish by the end of her shift. And, above all, there was no overtime. This was her paradise, a place where time flowed serenely and where she was free to do what she liked. An oasis of peace and harmony where she could rest and relax. She loved her home so much and wanted to lounge around forever. Even a girl like her, who was just starting out in life, managed to buy that dream house on her own. However, the only reason she was approved for a loan in the first place was because of the stability and reliability offered by her job as a receptionist. She really made the right decision in getting that job. It was difficult, but it was worth it, so she definitely wouldn't be fired. At lunchtime, she was very tired. That morning had been the worst. That tank showed up again and stayed there sitting all morning. Many people passed by just to see him. It was so crowded. And to make matters worse, the other receptionists were flattering him and not doing their jobs, which caused more people to go to his desk. This was already becoming harassment for her, and she missed her home. Suddenly, Jade shows up and tells her that the place was very nice, peaceful, and relaxing. He had no idea there was such a pleasant place in Eifer, so calm and with no one around. Alina activated her ability and took out her hammer. Jade took out his shield and said he hadn't done anything and just wanted to see how things were going. Alina told him to be quiet and to stop loafing around at her workplace and to go do his job for once, calling him a larva. She said that the lunch break was the only time she could spend in peace and wondered why he had to come there. Jade told her she was more violent than an unruly troll. She sat down and told him it was because he was so annoying. He said that once he focused on something, it became annoying. After all, he was said to be the best and most resilient tank in the entire guild, so he couldn't give up and relied heavily on his physical strength, willpower, and vitality. Alina pinched him, and he began to scream in pain and asked her to stop. He moved a little away from her and asked how it was the first time she activated her ability. People couldn't at that time, so he wanted to be able to activate his, but feared it would never happen. Alina told him she wouldn't tell him, and anyway, she already knew that whether an ability activated or not was like luck. It really couldn't be controlled. He said she was right, as abilities were a completely different power from each person's magic. They were unique, latent, and inherent to each individual. Unlike magic, which can be used by anyone as long as they have magical power and some knowledge, abilities couldn't be used if they hadn't been activated first. Although it is generally accepted that abilities are innate to all humans, the conditions for their activation remain unknown, and it is currently impossible to activate them intentionally. Conversely, there was no clear answer even to determine the nature of the ability or even what type of force activates it in the first place. There were so many mysteries to what they called abilities, and that was why she thought they should use their power. Alina interrupted him and told him she was free to do what she wanted. But anyway, he wouldn't get anything from her sitting there all day doing nothing, so he should get to work and stop loafing around. She sighed and said she also needed to get back to work. An adventurer asked her if she had heard that Jade was there, and Alina told him that he had been there a while ago. However, she deeply regretted to inform him that she hadn't seen him since noon. He said he wanted to ask for advice on how to be a good tank. She told him it was a real shame, but she was sure that Mr. Jade, leader of the Silver Sword, had a lot to do. Suddenly, An adventurer yelled that he just wanted that damn mission. He was a first-class adventurer, so he said that if he told him to do something, he had to do it. Everyone was watching, and Alina thought that among the 10% of adventurers with a first-class license, Slay Ghost was a harsh claim maker who was famous for his bad temper and for throwing tantrums when he didn't get his way. He was known for causing commotions at the Adventurer Guild desk. Alina really didn't want to get involved with that type, but she was at the desk of the new recruit, Lyra. Lyra told her she was very sorry for the inconvenience. However, they didn't have the mission he was requesting. He hit the counter again and said it was impossible for that to be true and bet that she was just hiding it. He called her an arrogant receptionist and asked who she thought she was. The girl told him she truly couldn't help him, and Alina stepped between them and asked what the problem was. He told her to stop hiding it and to give him the secret mission. Alina, upon hearing this, told him that as her colleague had informed him earlier, they deeply regretted to inform him that they didn't handle the secret mission he was talking about. He told her he didn't need to hear more of her robotic, pre-made phrases, so she should shut up and get him the mission. Alina thought he wasn't listening. Anyway, no one there could offer him what he wanted, and that was because the secret mission he was talking about simply didn't exist. The secret mission was nothing more than a rumor that spread among adventurers. It all started with unfounded gossip like, "There's a hidden dungeon no one knows about." Word of mouth made the rumors grow, and soon, the words "secret mission" were invented and spread among adventurers. Slay told her he knew everything and wasn't someone they could deceive. He was very aware that the secret mission grants access to a hidden dungeon and that inside the dungeon was a special relic. They in the guild just wanted to keep the relic for themselves. Alina told him she assured him that all guild missions were revealed and publicly posted on the bulletin board. This infuriated Slay, and he told her to stop talking. They were the powerful adventurers, gods compared to them, the receptionists, so she had to obey. Alina, seeing this, wondered if she should hit him. She could also call her supervisor, but doubted that type would be satisfied, as they would just tell him the same thing. She wondered what she should do. Slay grabbed her by the shirt and told her to stop pretending and say something. While Alina looked at him with a cold stare, he told her that a simple receptionist shouldn't be giving that look to an adventurer and was starting to get on his nerves. Alina told him that any type of violence towards receptionists or any other member of the staff would result in immediate and permanent revocation of his adventurer license. He, very angry, told her that he didn't care about that and wouldn't be satisfied until he punched that arrogant face. And before he could land the punch on Alina, he was stopped by Jade. Slay panicked upon recognizing Jade and asked why the leader of the Silver Sword was there. Jade, with a very serious face, told him to keep his hand off Alina. He let her go and said he would do whatever the elite said, and then lunged at him, saying that tanks were nothing more than weaklings compared to attackers like him anyway. Jade grabbed his fist and told him that he thought tanks were weaker than attackers. Applying a bit of force, this made him start to hurt, and he told him not to touch him. Jade, in a threatening tone, told him that if he saw him touching Miss Alina, the receptionist, again, he should believe that he would not be so lenient. Slay felt intimidated and left the guild, shouting that he would remember all of this. Everyone began to praise how incredible and great Jade was, but he, without listening, asked Alina if she was okay. Seeing him, Alina said yes, while under her feet the magical summoning circle of her hammer disappeared, and she thanked him for his help. Jade told her that that guy could be really dangerous, so she shouldn't provoke him, and whispered that she really couldn't use that ability in public. Also told the esteemed adventurer what brought him to that place. This person, a bit nervous, said he was about to go home and then took a look inside and saw the commotion, so he decided to intervene. Alina smiled at him in a very terrifying way, and he said it would be a nuisance if he stayed any longer, so he would leave at that moment. Alina said it was a pity that he was leaving so soon and asked him to come back again with a smile. In the city streets, Slay was very upset, saying he hated them and that receptionist. She didn't even scream or complain a bit. She just looked at him as if he were trash she had stepped on. He really wouldn't calm down until he punched that bitch in the face. He stopped when he saw some adventurers transporting a clay golem, which was an incursion boss. Slay, seeing this, thought that some group brought it there with a teleporter after clearing their dungeon. It was sleeping, as defeated monsters usually vanish and don't retain their original form. So, they put it to sleep and brought it there to obtain raw materials and make weapons or armor with them. Slay put on a terrifying face and laughing, said he would give them all a lesson. Jade was walking down the street wondering what to do. For him, it would be easy to force Miss Alina to join his group using his connections and influence, but there was nothing more fragile than a forcibly assembled group, so he had to make her want to work with them. Suddenly, he felt a tremor and all the people were running and saying that a violent monster was wreaking havoc in the square. Jade saw the silhouette in the distance and ran toward the location. Upon arrival, he asked what was happening and if there was anyone who could explain what was going on, but everything was destroyed and several adventurers were lying on the ground. In front of him was the golem about to attack an adventurer. With his shield, he defended him from the attack. Jade told him to retreat while he kept it busy. He obeyed and, using a skill, Jade provoked the golem to keep it at bay. He was receiving the attacks with his shield, but they seemed overwhelming. One of the injured told him he shouldn't try to face the golem alone, as it was an incursion boss. This surprised Jade greatly, and the adventurer said that incursion bosses were twice as powerful as normal bosses, and that the minimum for completing an incursion was 3 groups. Jade said he already knew that, but he didn't understand what an incursion boss was doing there in the first place and how that had happened. The adventurer apologized because he didn't know how it had become that way. He had brought it there after putting it to sleep to collect raw materials from it, so it shouldn't have been able to wake up before at least 3 days. But suddenly, it woke up and started wreaking havoc. Suddenly, someone's laughter was heard from on top of the golem. It was Slay, saying that the shitty tank had finally arrived. This surprised Jade. Slay told him that, thanks to his super ability, the dream disturber could control the golem and it was still deeply asleep, living in a dream that he controlled. The golem was wreaking havoc within its dream. Jade asked if he realized what he was doing, making a golem destroy the city and putting everyone's lives in danger. He wouldn't get away with it. So, if he understood what he was saying, it wouldn't end well for him. Slay told him that he and that damn receptionist and the entire city would all be killed. The golem began to charge an attack. The adventurers, seeing this, said it was a mortal blow that could even blow away a tank and urged Jade to flee because he could die. Jade, seeing that there were still many people in the path of the attack, activated his Iron Wall Guardian ability and took the hit. He could endure it for the moment, but if the battle dragged on, fatigue would accumulate and, since he had no healer, he wouldn't be able to take another blow. It was impossible to teleport the golem out of the city at that moment, so he had no choice but to stay there and fight. Jade told the adventurers that he would keep it busy, so they should gather all the adventurers they found and bring them there. Slay told him that being able to block an incursion boss's attacks alone honored his name, but he didn't have a sub-tank to switch with, and most importantly, he had no healer. He asked how long he thought he could endure the attacks of an incursion boss. While the golem pressed Jade, he told him to make that city a hell. The golem charged another attack, and as it unleashed it, many huge rocks flew in different directions. Jade blocked one of the rocks, but it turned into a mini golem and began to fight with him. He thought that if they scattered across the city, it would be very bad, and Slay told him that the city would become a battlefield. Meanwhile, in the guild office, Alina was working on paperwork, complaining about the manager because he had asked her to finish the claims report by tomorrow morning. If she didn't finish the report that day, she was sure he would forget important details. Alina was upset because drafting a legal document took a lot of time. So, obviously, once again she was forced to do some abominable overtime, not precisely because there was some kind of commotion outside that would allow her to escape or anything. Suddenly, she heard screams outside and went out to see what was happening. In the distance, she saw Slay on top of the golem and thought he was the cause of all this. He just seemed like a monkey who didn't even understand when they tried to talk to him, so she couldn't say she was surprised he did that. She saw the long-range attack of the golem and didn't see any reason to complain so much, but she noticed the trajectory of the attack and panicked, rushing quickly. Upon arriving at her house, it had been hit by one of the rocks. Alina was trembling, as she had taken out a 30-year mortgage and the insurance wouldn't cover that. seeing that the rock had turned into a mini golem and started destroying her house. She was so enraged that she pulled out her hammer and dispatched the mini golem with one blow. She took a deep breath and, with a terrifying look, said she was going to kill him. Slay continued attacking with the golem, insulting and saying that they were all insignificant adventurers and that no matter how many came, they would never win. Jade thought they had managed to gather enough adventurers to form a few groups, but their attacks weren't working. The adventurers were in chaos, and the circumstances were against him. Slay was preparing for another attack when, suddenly, something flew in and hit him, taking off the golem's arm. Slay was surprised, and the golem let out a scream. In front of them was someone cloaked, holding a war hammer. Jade, upon seeing this, almost said their name and shouted, "The executioner." Everyone was surprised because the executioner was there, and they wondered what he was doing there. Many thought he only appeared in dungeons that took a long time to clear. Jade approached him and said she knew how strong she was, but this was a raid boss, and not even she could handle him. Slay said it was getting interesting and that this was the person the guild was moving heaven and earth to find. So if they killed him, he bet the guild would be pretty upset. Jade grabbed his shoulder and told him that he wouldn't be able to defeat the raid boss alone, so they needed to coordinate. Without listening, Alina said, how did he dare to destroy it? That house was the only oasis she had when she was tired from work. It was her heaven, and yet how dare he? With a very angry expression, she said she was going to kill him. She jumped into the air and, delivering another powerful blow, ripped off another arm from the golem. It let out a loud scream, and Jade activated his ability to keep the monster's aggro on him. This ability was basically the action of directing an attack toward someone or something. The tank's role was to redirect attacks toward him because he was the only one on the team capable of surviving them. Normally, even if he stole the aggro with magic, when a monster was hit by a truly powerful attack, it would surpass the taunt, and the aggro would automatically return to the attacker. But he had been the Silver Sword's tank for quite some time, and he wondered what was happening with Alina. He felt that if he lost even a fraction of his concentration, she would take all the aggro. Slay was surprised by the executioner's power, and she told him that he dared to destroy her paradise, so he would die for his sin, and she was going to drag him to the deepest part of hell. She jumped on top of the golem. Slay, seeing this, ordered the golem to finish her off, but the golem did not react, and she told him to repent in hell, idiot. And with a powerful blow to the golem's head, she split him in two. Jade was surprised again, as she had defeated the boss with a single blow once more, and that was all it took. Adventurers were saying that all their attacks had done nothing, and that it had to be a joke. Alina approached Slay, and he, on the ground and in panic, asked what kind of attack that was and how it was possible. Alina approached him very angrily, saying that if they hadn't taught him that destroying other people's things was something one shouldn't do, and raising her hammer, she directed it at him, shouting, and he, very scared, apologized. After hitting the ground beside him, he fainted. Jade approached her and told her that everything was fine, as it had ended well, and Alina, very angrily, told him that nothing was fine. She showed him her destroyed house, and on the ground, almost crying, asked him how she was supposed to live like this, and how she was supposed to heal her body and mind and her debt, which she still had to pay for 30 more years. She couldn't bear it any longer. It was too much. Jade, seeing her sadness, mustered up the courage and told her that if she wanted, she could stay at his house that night. Alina, with a serious face, told him that she was obviously going to stay at the inn, and asked if he could stop being stupid for a second. And now, thanks to that complaint, she would have to work extra hours and asked him to leave her alone once and for all. At the battlefield, there was a man asking if the executioner had been there. A young woman behind him said that was what the report said. She asked him, whether he or Jade from Silver Sword, why everyone was so obsessed with this so-called executioner when his existence had never even been confirmed. There were many other exceptional vanguards in the guild. He said that it was because the hidden potential of the executioner might surpass everything they had seen. She asked if he meant divine ability. He said yes, although until they met him and saw his ability firsthand, they couldn't be sure. But he thought it was worth looking into, So now he agreed with Jade, and they needed to get him to join the Silver Sword group. She said that if that was what he thought, she had nothing more to say, referring to him as the guild master. The guild master said the executioner had spoiled things and thanked him very much for protecting Eifer, but appearing like this was a fatal mistake and he should not hold a grudge against his ability. He activated an ability called Time Observer to see all that happened in that battle.